Good morning, interweb. Welcome back to the Artifexian podcast. In this month's episode, Bill and I cook some ancient breakfasts, and Abeski cooks a sky jellyfish. South Korea may lose its baller age reckoning system. More on retrograde climates, animate mass nouns, and a discussion on the different styles of world building. All that, plus lots of chewing, you have been warned, in this month's episode.
Shall we have breakfast?
Well, one of us is going to have breakfast. The other one of us didn't follow the rules.
The other one of us misunderstood the assignment.
Do you want to care to explain to people what it is we're meant to be doing and what it is we're going to do?
We were meant to be having breakfast together on air and talking about it. And I misunderstood that and thought we were going to just talk about the food that we had made and eaten previously. I still have some of my sauce left, so I might just go butter a slice of bread and have some sauce with it.
Oh yeah, go for it. So
okay.
While you're gone, I'll explain more stuff, so I'll see you in a bit.
All right, back shortly.
So specifically what we're doing, folks, is Bill has made some Egyptian food, Egyptian breakfast food, per the book Cooking in Ancient Civilisations, links in the show notes, and I have made some Mesopotamian food. I don't know what Bill has made exactly, but what I have made is, and there's pictures in the show notes and chapter art, I have made some whole wheat flatbread, I've made my own mustard cheese, and I've made yogurt soup. It doesn't look like yogurt soup because apparently all the grain in my yogurt soup consumed the soup part of the soup, so it looks kind of like couscous, but still. And I also have a beer here. One I did not brew myself because I do not have the time, patience, or skill to that, so I just bought a nice Polish beer. It's anachronistic and it's breaking immersion, but here we are. And like I said, Bill has made some Egyptian thing. I don't really know what he's made, and he'll be back in a moment to talk to us about this. We're also going to do the show in reverse order this month. So we're going to do the green room part first, which is going to be the talking about the cooking stuff. And then we're going to do world building. And then we're going to finish up with follow-up, purely because if we did it the normal way, we'd be eating at the end of the show. And then all the food would be cold, and that would be no fun. And then the final thing is, trigger warning, there will be chewing. There will be a lot of chewing. I'm going to try and minimize the chewing by moving the mic away, but you have been warned. People who are sensitive to it, there will be some chewing. It's inevitable.
I've got a very handy hotkey on my keyboard to mute my microphone.
Excellent.
I can slurp and chomp away and just turn that off.
So come here to me. What I explained to the folks what I made. What did you make? And also Bill's food. There'll be pictures of Bill's foods in the usual places as well. So explain what it is you made and ate.
I made a recipe of pan-fried kidneys, which was in the book as a breakfast recipe from ancient Egypt. Now the book did say that the scholarship was a little kind of muddy. That wasn't often written down, so it's kind of speculative. But it's known that kidneys were eaten, and the sauce is kind of a speculative one.
It was the same with the Mesopotamian stuff as well. It was so little was written down, and so little of the basic stuff was written down. The book made the analogy that think about how many times in the modern world someone has written down the recipe for making a cup of tea. It's just kind of assumed knowledge, and so they have to reconstruct and speculate, etc. So this is probably not exactly a Mesopotamian or an Egyptian breakfast, but it's based on some historical facts, so that's cool.
There is, although, an ISO standard for making tea.
No.
Yeah.
I bet you it's wrong, because everyone makes tea. The perfect way of making tea is the way any given person makes tea. And if you try and deviate from that, it's just wrong.
There is only one country that has objected to the protocol.
England.
Ireland. Objected on technical grounds, possibly for not pre-warming the vessels.
Who actually pre-warms the vessels, though? Come on.
I do.
Bill, get out.
I do.
No, you don't.
I swear to God I do. You convinced me of it when we lived together.
What? Did I? I never pre-warmed the vessels.
We lived together and you didn't expect, you did a blind taste test with me where you made me 2 cups of tea and one was in a pre-warmed mug and asked me which one was better. And I said the pre-warmed one was slightly better.
I have no recollection of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, I convinced you to do this madness. Jesus.
So yeah, I scald the mug, and I usually scald the teapot as well. If I'm making a full pot.
Sorry, folks, we're completely off topic here. Do you put the how do you make tea? Talk us through it from start to finish.
So am I making a mug or am I making a pot?
You're making a mug.
A mug. So I'll boil the kettle, and I'll like half fill the mug with the boiled water and swirl it around and empty it out, and then I'll put in a tea bag, and I'll like put in the boiling water. Ideally, I leave it stand for a while. Leave it stand for a minute or two. Fish out the tea bag, add some milk.
Correct. I agree with most of that. I think people who put the milk in while the tea bag in is weird. And people who leave the tea bag in for the entirety of the drinking event is also weird. I don't understand it.
I have been known to do both of those, but my standard is the other.
Have you got a preference for the type of vessel the tea is contained in?
I am kind of picky about the qualities of the mug. It should be kind of hefty. It should be sturdy. Like a thin mug doesn't feel right. It feels wrong in the hand.
I'm totally with you on that, Bill. And the mad thing is, like, you know, if you look like cross culturally, anytime someone offers you tea in that culture's like traditional teacup, it's always thin. And I'm just like, has every culture got this wrong? Like, you have to have a big bruiser of a mug to put the tea in. Otherwise, it feels and tastes weird.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree.
Very strange. And it happens all the time. Like, I remember we had tea in Korea, little thin mugs, and then we had tea in Morocco, little thin mugs. And I'm like, you are worlds apart, but you're all making the wrong decision.
I wonder, is part of it like that it's easier to make a big hefty mug than it is fine, delicate china. So that's kind of seen as a status thing, or it's a nice object to use rather than intimately connected to the quality of the tea itself.
I mean, that is probably it. That is probably it. Of late, I have taken to. I've been brainwashed. I've been radicalized by the captain, and I've taken to drinking tea out of travel mugs. And at first, when I first saw this, I was like, "That's barbaric! Like, you drink tea out of a big feck off mug," and then. Things like, I need to hop in the car immediately after getting up. I'll just put the tea in a travel mug so I can drink it along the way. And then I eventually became okay with that. And then I was like, but wait a minute, when the tea's in the travel mug and the little lid is closed, it stays warmer way longer. This is much better. And now I'm habitually drinking out of a travel mug and I kind of hate myself for it.
No, I think it's okay. I wouldn't judge you for it.
Others would though. So come here to me. Your recipe. Talk me through it. What did you do? What did it involve? Was there any stories around gathering of ingredients that are interesting? Because I have some. Talk me through your process and what you learned.
So as I said, I was making pan-fried kidneys, and the sauce was a vinegar and mustard sauce.
Interesting.
Yeah. So. First of all, getting the kidneys was slightly difficult. I went to a few places. There's kind of a food hall near where I live, which used to have like a really good organic butcher's. And I hadn't been in a while. And I went in and the butcher has retired. So there were no kidneys to be found there. And then I went to 2 Eastern European shops, which both had like butcher counters and neither stocked lamb kidneys. And eventually I went to... another butcher's nearby to me. And the recipe called for 1 pound of lamb kidneys. And I got all of the kidneys he had, which was half a pound. So, yeah, I guess it's just, maybe I timed it weird or something, or it was just unfortunate when I went to look for them, but it was slightly difficult to actually get them. But I got them. What I could not get was powdered mustard.
Yeah, nor could I, but there's an easy fix for that.
What was your easy fix?
You buy mustard seeds and you bang them in a mortar and pestle until you make your own powdered mustard.
That is precisely what I did. I also had the idea of getting a pepper mill and grinding them like pepper in a pepper mill. Because, they're kind of similar size to peppercorns.
That could work.
So I got one in Tesco's, and I'm always weird about using stuff directly from shops, even though it had been in a sealed box or whatever. So I washed them, and then when I went to grind it the next day, it hadn't fully dried out, so they got a little bit gummed up. So I did end up using the mortar and pestle.
Wait, sorry, back up. You're a little bit weird about using items from directly from shops.
And like anything like that, any like kitchenware or anything, or...
Okay, what's the rationale here?
Because, I don't know, it might be gross, it might be dirty.
Wow. Jesus, I would not think that way. I would imagine that it's probably dirtier, like when I take it home and begin to use it. I'd imagine it's hyper sterile in a shop, no?
I wouldn't imagine hyper sterile.
I guess lots of people be touching the things, I suppose.
Yeah.
Maybe. I've never washed an implement bought from a shop outside of like you use it and then you put it in the dishwasher, but I've never like pre-washed it to make sure it's clean. That's mad.
Oh, I always do.
Wow. Fascinating. Yeah, so your mustard sauce, or your mustard and vinegar sauce, so you had to basically make your own like mustard puree.
Well, mustard powder.
Mustard powder. Okay, and you sprinkle that in the thing. Yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah. So I did a test run yesterday, with one of my 3 kidneys that I had gotten. And are you still eating?
Yeah, man.
Okay, well, bear with me for this. You know what the biological function of a kidney is?
Yeah, it's where your thinking happens. Yes,
I mean, maybe some culture has believed that at some point.
Yeah, the kidney's for processing urine, isn't it? Or for making urine.
Yeah. And after I cooked this first kidney, boy did I know.
Oh, no way. Did the lamb or something forget to go to the bathroom before it was slaughtered?
I don't know what the story was, but it smelled real bad.
Oh
It
no.
smelled real bad. And I had the recipe had called it to be soaked in milk, to remove like that kind of, that flavor and that smell. And that did not work. So I looked it up and I asked a few people who were more experienced with that cut. And apparently you're meant to, because I'd never, I'm a reasonably decent cook, you know this. I like cooking, but I'd never worked with kidney before. You're supposed to cut it open and like remove some stuff inside, and they often come in a membrane that you have to remove. Now mine didn't come in the membrane, but I hadn't taken out some of the fatty stuff that's on the inside of the kidney.
Oh, Jesus.
So yeah, I literally the one I had yesterday, the one I made yesterday, I couldn't eat it.
Wow.
Yeah, no, it was horrible.
And then, but I'm assuming you've ate some kidneys. So what was the difference between the other kidneys and this kidney?
Well, the ones that I made this morning, I did cut them open and remove that stuff.
You did.
And also I soaked them overnight.
Wow.
Rather than just for an hour. Just to be, absolutely on the safe side. So that's kind of an interesting thing, like what you're saying about kind of assumed knowledge. It's unlikely you're going to find anyone writing down how to make a cup of tea. I guess the people who wrote this Cooking in Ancient Civilisations book kind of assumed people would know how to work with offal.
Yeah.
Which I did not.
My response to a lot of the recipes in my section of the book was that, they're presented as things like, oh, this would be a dinner for a peasant farmer or whatever. And it was just mad the amount of times that the ingredients being used are just like completely non-standard today. And like you remember, like you saying you had to go to many butchers or whatever. I had to do the same thing to try and get some of the ingredients to make this breakfast. To find the various different types of wheat that apparently were just common back in the day, and to find the stuff to process cheese or whatever. And it just seems like that was something that all peasant farmers just had on hand and had knowledge of working with. Whereas we've completely lost that. Like, it's mad.
Yeah. And that kind of goes back to what we were saying before about kind of technology, that it isn't, a strictly linear thing, and skills and stuff are actually lost.
Yeah, but I think in our case, it might be response to technology, because like so much of the stuff, like if I thought about it during the week and I was like, so much of the stuff I make and eat on the regular is just either pre-cooked or it's canned and things and it's prepared, and like the sort of, the knowledge of how to prepare these things is kind of almost gone. Like if you ask anyone how to make cheese, they probably wouldn't know. Like I wouldn't have been able to give you even a vague idea of how cheese is made. I'm just like, you go to the supermarket and you pick up the cheese. Like that's how cheese is made. Like it arrives made. And the minute you step outside of that, it's so tedious. Like making the cheese, man, was a 2-day affair. Like there was so much to making this cheese. It was just mental. Like, so just, I kept thinking like, geez, these peasant farmers must have been so overworked. And then I remember to think like, no, this would just be something that they could do, quick, fast, and be fine.
For sure.
And so your picture shows the kidney plus sauce with a slice of bread. Is that what the recipe called for, or would the Romans just would the Egyptians just eat the kidney, just take it in hand and eat it?
I didn't really specify.
Oh, so that was a bit. The bread was a bit twist on the recipe.
Exactly. Yeah, the bread was my little flourish.
I'll tell you one thing about my meal. The bread, right? The not having access to a lot of yeasts or self-raising flour is weird to me. Like the bread I'm eating now is like, it's unleavened bread. Unleavened bread is a bit strange. Like it's quite tough, and the colder it gets, the harder and more inedible it gets, which is just very weird to my modern palate. And apparently the book was saying that like a lot of people would in urban Mesopotamian centers, they would snub going to bakeries for this very reason, because if the bakery made bread or whatever, it would very quickly deteriorate. And so the off-the-shelf breads would be nowhere near as good as the stuff that you make at home that you could eat immediately, which is like the polar opposite of now. Like, if I make my own bread now, it's going to be crap, and it's be much better if I just go to like the bakery section of Tesco and get a beautiful loaf of bread. It's a direct reverse. I
guess. Yeah, I suppose if you're getting from like a bakery kind of thing, but if you're good at it, I think homemade bread is better than your average shop-bought bread.
Yeah, but if you're good at it, but I think I certainly amn't. And I would say a lot of people I know wouldn't say that their breads would be better than like a shop-bought bread. Maybe better than like crap, sponge bread, like the American white bread crap. Maybe better than that. But if someone tried to make like a soda bread, for example, my soda bread would be nowhere near as good as a soda bread made in the bakery, I think. Yeah. And I thought there was a really interesting sort of role reversal, that it's like the urbanites, you wouldn't have a bunch of hipster Mesopotamians hanging outside bakeries getting their like bespoke bread, because that would be just not as good as what they can make, which I think is really fun. A thing that came up in the book for me that I want to share, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, of course.
Man, this flatbread is getting real intense. My non soup. Oh, I never explained this to you. So I tried to make yogurt soup.
Yogurt soup?
Actually, yeah,
that's a crazy idea.
Sorry, that's really, I should talk about this. This is interesting. So you get a bunch of bulgur wheat, right?
Very good.
And you lather it in natural yogurt, and then you bake it. So you dehydrate the wheat, and all the yogurt basically kind of like either is absorbed into the wheat or evaporates, and you end up at the end of the day with a bunch of bulgur wheat that looks identical to bulgur wheat but has a faint waft of like natural yogurt on it. And then you use that to like thicken up a broth of water, cumin, chickpeas, and onion, right?
Okay.
And it's a really nice taste, man. Like I kind of went with that recipe just because I was like, that's going to be horrible, but it's really lovely. The problem is though, I made this yesterday, so I didn't have to do too much cooking this morning, and the bloody bulgur wheat ate all of my yogurt soup. So the bowl that looks like couscous on the picture I sent you, that's actually meant to be a soup with a bit of wheat like in the soup, but it's actually just like the soup is all in the wheat. And I didn't want to add more water to water it down because then it just wouldn't be as tasty. But it's really nice.
It's still tasty. It's
still really tasty. It's just definitely not a soup. Okay. What was the other thing I was going to say? Oh yeah. So the thing they were talking about in the book was the social etiquette surrounding eating. through various time periods. And I think this is kind of immediate like world building relevance, I suppose. Because it's like they talked about how in Mesopotamia at least, that there was a restriction on who can attend formal dinners. Some cultures or peoples within Mesopotamia were allowed women to attend. Some did not. Some did allow women to attend, but they'd have to like sit and behave in a different way to the men. And I think that's something that's immediate relevant and something that maybe I don't think about. Like, I don't go to a restaurant and be like, why are there women here? It's everyone just goes to the restaurant, and I think that's a fun idea. Well, not a fun idea, but it's an idea to think about, like the different societal roles and whether or not they can partake in the act of eating, and how do they partake in the act of eating. I think is an interesting one. And the book talked about how the men in Mesopotamia, it would be customary for them to recline whilst eating, which I was like on a chaise lounge sort of jazz, like just to paint me like one of your French girls. And I'm like, that's a really awkward way to eat, it's not very ergonomic, I suppose, but they would do that as a sign of status. And then any women that were present, they were not allowed to do that. They'd have to sit like bolt upright. And I was kind of like, I could imagine there never being a sort of woman's revolt in Mesopotamia over this, because it'd be like, clearly this is so much better. Like, we don't want to do what the men are doing here, because God, eating reclined would just be awful. I think I wouldn't be able to do that.
I can't imagine it being comfortable or aiding digestion in any way, or like even like drinking from like a glass while lying down is really awkward.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Or like lying on your side and trying to drink a cup of tea.
It's amazing the amount of times that we humans end up doing the thing that is the most awkward for some like nonsense social reason.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about, because you've done a little bit of traveling, do you know anything about various different like eating etiquettes from around the world? Like, as in like, who eats, how they eat, when they eat, that sort of thing?
I don't actually. No, I don't really know. And I'd imagine there would be a great diversity in it.
Do you not pick up something in, where were you? Zambia? Zimbabwe?
Yeah.
Zambia? Anything from Zambia?
Not in terms of kind of the social stuff around it, no. But like, I was eating primarily with the group that I went there with, We did get given some meals in a few places that we visited.
And what was the jazz like? Eating at tables, eating on the floor, cutlery, that sort of thing. What was?
Eating. Like just out of a bowl in your hands, as I remember.
No cutlery.
I mean, there often was cutlery, but the normal way to eat there, from what I remember, was so their staple is nshima.
Oh, what's that?
It's they have it in lots of different places. It's essentially kind of like a maize porridge.
Okay.
There's different names for it in different places. Oh God, let me check what it's called in other places. It's a little bit like polenta in Italy. It's called ugali or pap in other places. So yeah, it's made from cornmeal, and it's kind of boiled into sort of a porridge. And from what I remember, in the bit of Zambia we were in, the normal way to do it is you kind of take it with your hand and dip it in the relish or dip it in the stew or whatever. It's quite tasty, I have to say. I enjoyed it quite a lot. I've always been in meaning to make it, but I haven't gotten around to it.
Oh, next episode, what's called traditional Zambian cooking with Edgar and Bill. I remember we were in Morocco, and our tour guide for the desert, he was like, I don't know why we ended up doing this. Oh, we ended up not being able to go home for a few hours, and we were like, what the hell do we do? And then he was like, you're going to hang out with me. And I was like, okay. So we went like
So where did you say this was?
in Morocco.
In Morocco.
And so we went like dune riding. Like we took his Jeep and we went like racing up and down dunes and stuff. And then we stopped for dinner in his family home. And in his family home, it was very. I was kind of surprised at the sex segregation around eating, because it was like his wife came out. And she was like, "Oh, we've guests. Let me make some food." And she made like a bunch of food, and we're sitting on the floor. There's like a big bowl in the middle, and you're given like flatbread to scoop up the contents of what's in the big bowl. But crucially, there was the duplicates of everything, and the I think they were young girls. They might have been young boys. You know, there's that age when they're very small where you're like, I don't know what you are.
Yeah.
They were all with the mother, and she was like positioned further away from us and the tour guide, the father. So it appeared to be segregated based on kind of like man plus guest and then the rest of family, and that was kind of weird. I was like, I don't want to say uncomfortable because, you know, different cultures and that sort of jazz, but it was kind of like, why can't they all come and eat with us? You know, I didn't obviously say anything, but I was kind of mad to me, and particularly because of the sort of like the communal element where there's a big giant serving thing in the middle and everyone eats from that. It's like the setup is communal, but we're going to make it not communal, which kind of weirded me out a little bit. And then contrast to Korea, where like in Korea, a Korean barbecue is a big thing. And that whole shtick is just hyper communal. It's like everyone, or at least in a restaurant, everyone sits in front of a big ass hot plate with all the food frying on it at once, and everyone just like, you know, grabs and takes and things like that, which I think is great. And I think it's really sad that in Western culture we don't have that. It's all kind of like, you know, you go to a restaurant, you're served your plate of food, and it's all very kind of like, this is mine. Like I really like the vibe of, there's just food scattered everywhere and everyone's lunging over people and taking bits, and you don't order for yourself, you order as a group. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I like that idea.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Another interesting story from my part of the book was there's this bizarre thing the book asserts in that the gods in Mesopotamia needed to be fed. Because, you know, the divine beings also need to have earthly food, which is a bit mad when you think about it. But anyways, so the way this would happen is that they'd cook a whole bunch of food and they'd like bring it to the temple, and then they would like close a curtain, and then that would be like the gods are dining. And then after a while, the priest would like open up the curtains, and then they'd take the like air quotes leftovers out, and those leftovers would be given to the people. And I was like, that's mad. Like, is there someone who goes in there and like, a bit like, you know, Santa with the carrot and the milk? Do they just kind of take away the carrot and milk and be all like, look, the gods have eaten? But apparently it was tradition that the gods, it was known that the gods only ate with their eyes. So you just need to show them all the food, and they consumed the food visually. And then so the equivalent amount of food would come out of the temple as went into the temple, which the book contrasts with, I think it was Rome or something, where there was a similar-ish tradition, but you would burn the food, so the gods would consume the smoke of the food. Which, to be fair, I think the Mesopotamians are onto something there, because you don't want to like go into the effort of making, you know, like prime Wagyu beef and then burning it. You know, it'd be a much better idea if the gods could just eat it offhand, or just visually. And then I thought it was really fun. Like, you know, let's all, much like we go like in some cultures, some Western cultures, like we did like pray, give thanks for the food. And it's like, we need to just park the food here and let the gods eat first, and then we can eat. I think that's a really fun little cultural thing. Yeah.
And like they still get kind of the first dibs in it, but it's not actually changed or not actually kind of destroyed or anything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, there's so much there that I really enjoy, like just from a cultural angle, because of the whole like honoring gods and like subservience is built into that, and there's just like a whole bunch of layers to that little tradition, and that I find really, really interesting.
In the Egyptian section, so, regarding gods, there was a story that, or there was a point made that for a while fish was considered taboo in Egyptian culture.
What?
Now, not like necessarily very widespread, or rigidly enforced, but there was a degree of taboo for the eating of fish, and possibly because fish ate Osiris's phallus when he was dismembered, and he was like thrown into the water, and that was the bit that like wasn't recovered because fish ate it.
Who's Osiris?
So Osiris is like the I think it was Osiris. He's like one of the kind of chief gods, one of the top boys, and he gets his kind of origin is he's dismembered and his body parts are scattered, and then his wife Isis, I think, gathers up all the pieces and reassembles them.
No, that's the dog from Downton Abbey, man.
What is?
ISIS? No, never mind. It was a joke. Never mind.
Okay, no, I haven't seen Downton Abbey.
I haven't seen ISIS. No, the shtick is that the Earl of Grantham, the guy who owns the abbey, he names all his animals
Hugh
after.
Bonneful, yeah.
What?
Hugh Bonneful.
That's it. Yeah, he names all his animals after. I don't know if it's exclusively Egyptian gods, but it's gods, and so he has this adorable Labrador called Isis. Which I found really strange because it's there's something, I don't know, there's something evil about the word ISIS. It sounds very nasty. ISIS.
Do you think?
Yeah, I don't think that's a cute name at all.
I quite like it.
I mean, I'm not saying I don't like it, but I don't think I'd name a cute Labrador ISIS. I don't. It doesn't have the right mouthfeel for me. It sounds sinister. Maybe it's all the sibilants. I don't know. But yeah, so fish are taboo because the fish ate your man's phallus.
Yeah, that's one of the things in the chapter, yeah.
That's so weird. Food taboos, I find a very fascinating part of our culture as well, because oftentimes they just don't make any sense whatsoever. Us humans, we're a big fan of telling people not to do things. Mental. Well, how do we ever land on this as a modus operandi? Don't understand. There was this isn't really taboo, but it's again, it's just leading on from stuff I was saying earlier. Milk apparently in ancient Mesopotamia had a weird sort of taboo, non-taboo. It was like it had an ambiguous social status. In that, because peasant farmers or whatever would have a bunch of cows, milk, the product of those cows, was seen as being very lower class. You drink milk, therefore you must own a bunch of cows, therefore you are not an urbanite like me, you are lesser, etc. That sort of thing. But also, apparently it was extremely common to offer milk to the gods in, give me a second, in like these ornate, like alabaster libation vessels. I don't know what that means, but apparently there's a big deal about offering milk to the gods.
I think libation just means drink. A drink poured out as an offering to a deity. Okay.
Oh, all right. Oh, that is a very specific word. Jesus.
But it's also used as kind of like offhandedly as a drink in general. If you're being jocular.
Jesus, man, this bread keeps getting worse. It's so tough. I am eating rubber. It is. The book was not lying when it said eat it immediately out of the oven. Jesus Christ. Anyway, yeah, so offering milk to the gods was a big deal as well. And there was kind of like, the book doesn't know why the doublethink was occurring here, but they speculate it might be something like milk went through blessings before it was served to the gods, to like rid it of his lower class status. Right. Or it was milk that was necessarily gotten from like temple cows, which are different from, the working class cow. And all this sort of jazz. So there seemed to be like this weird, status of milk, and they kind of were a little bit particular about like what the milk is doing in respect to like social order, which I think is a bit nuts.
From a blessed herd, it's classy then.
And I guess we kind of do the same thing with like alcohol to a degree, because I mean like a brandy is classy as all hell, but if you drink God, this bread, man. Jesus. But if you drink like cheap cider out of a plastic bottle, it's considered not very classy. So I guess we kind of do this with a lot of foods anyways,
Yeah, that kind of makes sense. There's more to it than just what the substance is.
No, like the presentation of it and like, yeah. Yeah, so I guess, the same milk presented in the correct vessel might be like, whoa, fancy.
Apparently, in ancient Egypt, milk was part of the ritualized offerings for the dead.
Really?
Yeah. So it says here the earliest recorded reference to milk is in the funerary offerings for King Unas, who had milk, 3 kinds of beer, and 5 kinds of wine for the afterlife.
That man was not spoiled at all, was he? 5 kinds of wine. Jesus Christ. Hold on a second. I want to pull up a list here. Give me a second, because this list kind of blew my mind. But you need to bear with me. Sorry, I have a physical copy in front of me here, so lots of noise, lots of table page turning. Hey, there's the table noise. Yeah. So another thing that hit me was, and I probably should have known this already, but the amount of foods that like just weren't present in the ancient world, and I should specify again, like
didn't have pizza.
Yeah, they had no bubble tea, is what they had. I should specify that this book uses the term ancient world, but it's clearly using that in reference to only Mesopotamia, Egypt, Greece, and Rome.
Yeah.
So it makes no assertions when it says ancient world. It makes no assertions about anywhere outside of those areas. But yeah, so we have potatoes, squashes, pumpkins, not present. Most beans, not present. Carrots in their modern, I knew this, but carrots in their modern incarnation as being orange, not a thing. They were just all colors under the sun. All vegetables apparently were a lot bitterer, thinner, and less fleshier than they currently are, which makes sense. Maize isn't there, rice isn't there. Chicken was not a staple for like many, many years until the pre-classical period, they say. Turkey's not there. Cinnamon, ginger, cloves, nutmegs, cardamom, all not there. And the list goes on and on and on about stuff that isn't there. Sugar not there. And even when sugar did make its way across, it was apparently only really used for medicine and not for sweetening. They do that with fruit juices. Coffee, tea, chocolate, vanilla, distilled spirits weren't there. It's like everything was like hard flatbread. Mental. Crazy.
Yeah. I like a lot of those things.
I was thinking that. And the mad thing was like, if you think about the idea of tomatoes not being there, and you think of like Rome, sure, like Italy and tomatoes are like synonymous. That's that's their whole thing, and it's like it's an import. Mad.
Yeah, it's only been like 400 years.
Yeah, it's insane.
Nah, 600.
Well, but it hasn't been since antiquity.
Yeah.
Which is just absolutely mental. But yeah. So that is, how long have we been doing this? We're 40 minutes, dear God. Just a quick review on the food I made here. Again, pictures will be on screen. Yogurt soup, absolutely delicious. So again, that was a bunch of bulgur wheat used to thicken up a broth made with water, chickpeas, onions, and cumin. Really, really lovely and surprisingly lovely. Like, I could eat that every day. Cheese, mustard cheese, also very lovely, and I'm shocked I managed to make something that is cheese. Like, absolutely shocked. And is it like, once you get your hand on all the expensive and rare ingredients, cheese is actually not that bad to make. Like, it's actually quite doable. It's just tedious getting all the things. The cheese that I made tastes like a very mild feta, and I have more of it left, and I'm going to try and mature it over the weeks and months to something that's more tangier. Flatbread, delicious, can only be eaten immediately after being cooked, otherwise it's rubber. The idea of not having self-raising flour or any sort of leavening agent is just insanity to me, and I don't know how they functioned without there being some degree of airiness to their bread products. Like, everything is like a dense brick, and that's mad. And then I make no comment on beer because I bought a Polish beer. I did not brew my own beer. What are your summation and talking points, finalizing talking points around your breakfast that you ate without me?
Well, I ate some of it with you.
Oh yeah, you ate the sauce.
Yeah, I had a slice of bread with the sauce. Okay, so kidney, and I suppose working with any other offal, make sure that you know what to do with it, that it's not necessarily good to go right from the butcher's. That's on me. But, learn from that mistake. Yeah, the sauce wasn't all that nice, to be honest.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I tried to follow the thing as closely as I could, so maybe something went wrong somewhere, but it just was very had this kind of harsh bitterness to it. I know it was vinegar, but it wasn't really, and I love vinegar, but it wasn't really a vinegary kind of taste, exactly.
Sorry, talk to me again. What are the ingredients of the sauce?
So the sauce, so you fried the kidneys in butter, right?
Mm.
And then after you take them out, the butter is still there. And you add diluted vinegar and powdered mustard. And you heat it for 45 seconds was the time given. And then you add some chopped parsley and you swirl it around and you drizzle it over the kidney. So that's what you can see in one of the photos. And you can see the sauce. That's what I poured over it. I had one of the kidneys by itself and then I had the next one with the sauce. And yeah, I had to kind of make an executive decision what kind of vinegar to use because the book didn't really say what vinegar they had in ancient Egypt.
Same.
So I figured maybe they wouldn't have had distilled malt barley vinegar. So I went with white wine vinegar because I know that they did have wine and it's very easy to go from wine to vinegar. Yeah,
That's
and also I'm not that big a fan of mustard. I don't like mustard as a condiment. Like when you get a jar or whatever of mustard. I figured I'd try it as in this form and see.
So if I may jump in here, I know this is meant to be closing, but now there are more talking points. I'm kind of with you. More often than not, I don't like mustard. And I had to make my own mustard to make the mustard cheese, because you essentially just spread mustard throughout the cheese and then curd it up. I started making it and I was like, oh, it's going to be awful, like all the mustards. But this mustard was lovely. And I think a lot of mustards like Dijon or that whole grain mustard, they're kind of, by virtue of industrialization or whatever, they're kind of mass produced to be kind of super weapons of itself. It's super spicy, it's super intense, everything's just ramped up. And this mustard I made was chill AF. It was just some ground mustard seeds, a little bit of vinegar to make it into a bit of a paste, and it was so nice that you could just eat it with a spoon as a snack. It didn't have that harsh bitterness. It was delicious, absolutely delicious. So I wonder, is it what you don't like about mustard is the modern hyper mustard we have? Because this mustard was I bet you I could give it to people and not tell them it's mustard and be like, what is this thing? It's just so not mustard. It's crazy.
I'll have to try that.
Yeah. I
have an entire bag of mustard seeds to do something with now. So
oh, stop! I have so much wheat bran. I had to buy wheat bran just to dust a surface. I now have a kilo of wheat bran. I don't know what to do with. I have bulgur wheat. I'd never cooked with bulgur wheat outside of this dish. And I'm like, what do I do with these things? I also have the enzymes to make cheese. And I'm like, of all the things, I cannot really, short of just continuing this cheese making odyssey, I can't really use these enzymes for anything. So I have a lot of crap lying around the kitchen. Anyhow, sorry, you were summarizing things. Keep going.
So that was the sauce. The kidney was actually very nice now today. When I had cleaned it out properly and soaked it for a bit longer. As I said, I had to kind of make an executive decision to have something with it, so I just used bread because it was nearby. And I figured if the ancient Egyptians had access to soda bread, they would have eaten it.
Oh yeah,
They definitely would have.
I think it's safe to assume that anything can be accompanied with bread always.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't really have, I think that's all my points, the assumed knowledge and, what to do with which vinegar, etc. But, it was a good experience. I would cook with kidney again. It turned out nicely. I probably wouldn't be in a rush to make the sauce again, though.
I really want to try this sauce. Oh, wait a minute. I have this cookbook in front of me. I could just make said sauce. I am making the sauce. I want to see how bad this is. Man, maybe
Well, no, you see, I think part of it will be the fact that it was specifically the butter that the kidneys were cooked in, so it'll have some of the fats and stuff that's souped out of the meat.
Crap, I'm not sure I want to go on a kidney finding odyssey.
Yeah.
Do you know, I think we might have missed a trick here, Bill. I think we should have perhaps cooked the same dishes, not different dishes. That might have been a trick.
Okay, next time we do a food episode, we'll cook together and we'll record together and we can eat each other's dishes.
Like, as in we meet each other in meat space and cook in meat.
Yeah, or vegan space, whatever. But
vegan space. We are definitely not vegan. Humans are not vegan. That's an idea actually, and we could maybe do something from Rome or Greece then.
Yeah.
That is a very interesting. Folks, let us know if you're interested in this. I'm not sure how much interest there is in more like Artifexian cooking, but if there is interest, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Final thing before we move on to the rest of the show. Just a funny little thing. I went into Holland and Barrett, which is kind of like, for those who don't know, it's like a kind of like a bougie health store.
Health foods and supplements and
expensive health foods and supplements. I would say this is not. Yeah, this is for people who have perhaps a little bit more money than sense. So I went in there anyways because a lot of these ingredients were kind of like you can't just get them in any random supermarkets. I had to go look at in the health stores, and I went into this Holland and Barrett, and I looked around, couldn't find what I wanted. I began asking this. I think she was a teenager, perhaps early 20s, the clerk, about the ingredients, and she kind of goes like, "Wow, what on earth are you making here?" Because it was just a random assortment of ingredients. And then I was like, time for banter. And so without like blinking and without missing a beat, I just looked at her dead on and was like, I'm recreating the breakfast of an ancient Mesopotamian temple priest. And then stopped dead. And then she looked at me, was kind of like, what the f***? And then there was this moment of like, is this person crazy? And I was like, it's okay, Edgar. I'm just going to stay here and I'm just going to let the orca stew for a little bit. And you could see her skin crawl. She was like, what do I do and say? And then eventually I was like, I have this podcast. It's an internet thing we're doing. She was like, oh, okay, makes sense. And there was a moment there where she was mortified. It was hilarious. And further, actually, there's an interesting idea of like how a lot of things, if you were just like, I am doing X, people would be like, that's crazy. But the minute you caveat it with for the internet, everyone's like, influencers. That makes sense. It's nuts, like. It's absolutely nuts, like. You know, and the one that comes up with me an awful lot is my job description. Like, I explain to people what I do, and they're like, wait a minute, you sit around building fantasy worlds? What? And then you go, for the internet. And they go, oh, okay, yeah, you're a YouTuber. It's like, you know, it's just this weird thing. You put for the internet on it, and everyone goes like, that weird behavior is perfectly explainable. Madness. Anyhow, cooking corner?
Done.
So, Bill, given that this is the Artifexian cooking show, you've done some cooking-related world building, correct?
I have done some food-related world building, correct.
Excellent. Do you want to do the usual, give us a rundown, launch into it?
It's a letter. We have seen one of these characters before, and another one has been mentioned, so keep your earballs peeled for that. And I'll get straight into it.
Cool.
Macavar. I have left this morning on company business. I may not be home this evening, so I have instructions. Please prepare the spiced Atramia jelly for tomorrow's meal. Chief Bailiff Teidfov is attending, and he has a particular fondness for that meat. Serve it in the Otvevi style. If this is not familiar to you, I shall describe it below. Firstly, remove all the lower appendages, being careful to cut as close to the body as possible. The longer limbs should be set aside for curing. The lesser ones may be used as offal. The excess skin of the sack should be carefully cut free. Carefully, I say, as it is required for later use. After these preparations, rub the central bulb with vinegar and salt, and then rinse in cool water. It requires no further cleaning. Stuff the bulb with figs and ice herbs, and rub in oil. Wrap the bulb in the skin from the sack and rub once more with oil and ice herbs. Bake this in the number 2 oven for 3 turns of the prime glass. The baker has been left instructions to prepare a setting of tentacles and pastry. Place the roasted bulb in the centre of this pastry. I trust the selection of other dishes to your expertise. I will be taking to the table at midnight. As to other business pertaining to the kitchen, it has not escaped my attention that theft of foodstuffs from my stores has increased in the past weeks. As head chef, I expect diligence in ensuring this does not exceed reasonable amounts. Given the frequent food riots in Lansk's current climate, servants relying on company wealth and supplies is advantageous to us. Threatening the stability of those supplies is not. Those serving my household can expect to be well fed, not to profit from thievery. I have every reason to expect your competence and cooperation in this matter. Your attachment to my current staff is new, but a long and mutually prosperous relationship is certain, should we understand each other. I trust we understand each other. Finally, ensure that all bread, flour and meal ordered for the house are from the mill at First Tower, and ensure it is clearly ordered in the name of my staff. Erbavi is buying the sawdust from my timberworks, in exchange for a good price on unadulterated grain. Dajag to Shansha, Commander, Tamar Company Lansk Depot.
Okay, cool. I gotta say, I was thoroughly confused about what the hell was being cooked up until the last point and was like, I think I get it. Because it's just the way the information is handed out. You're like, what on earth? It's meat, bulb? Really strange. But we'll get into that. We have met Tajag Deshencha before.
We have.
Yeah, we have. Now, again, I've completely forgotten. So do you want to give me a rundown on who the hell he is?
So we first encountered Dajag when he was at a New Year's celebration in Otvev. It's one of the early things I actually wrote in this setting. He was injured and he was on a kind of a light duty, and went to a big party.
Oh, that's it. It's the holiday celebrations.
Yeah, the Year's Rise revel.
I do remember that.
So that was Dajag. And then later he was stationed in Lansk and he witnessed the big riot. That was kind of the first indication of all that was happening in the city and all of the kind of the labor agitation. That was his next assignment after he had recovered from his injury. And now he's actually been promoted to the depot commander.
Ooh.
So he's still got a job on the ground. He's kind of in an administrative role rather than working like being on a vessel.
And talk to me about this new character, Makavar.
Makavar is the head chef in Dajag's household.
I immediately think of like Downton Abbey style things in terms of like how the food is prepared and that sort of crack. Is it like that? You have like a staff who live in the basement who do all the food and cleaning, and then
somewhat, yeah, and it will be kind of similar to that.
Okay, cool.
Makavar is an old military kind of associate of Dajag's, and he's given them this job because of their previous connection.
Oh, has Makavar fallen somewhat then? I would imagine if you were a military person and now you're cooking, it's a bit of a social downgrade, no?
He wasn't like a high-ranking officer or anything, and he's sort of retired from the military.
Oh, okay, cool. And what about this Chief Bailiff Te Aitov, who is attending the meal? Anything about him?
So we've heard of him before. He's the chief bailiff of Lansk's sort of municipal authorities, and he's also from Mirsphere, as Dajag is, and they're kind of meeting for kind of political strategizing together, or kind of working out what to do about the agitation.
Mm-hmm. And so then we get to the food, right? Mm-hmm. So this spiced Atmaria jelly.
Atramia.
Atramia. I read that completely incorrectly. I'm assuming that is some sort of jellyfish-like thing.
Yes, more or less. Definitely more so the jelly, less so the fish.
Less so a fish? Do you mean as in not in water?
Yes.
Sky jellyfish.
Yes.
I'm not wrong. Woo. Okay. So these are flying gelatinous jelly fish-like things.
Kind of. They're not really so gelatinous. So the bulb is kind of the central body, and that has a sac around it that can kind of increase or decrease in buoyancy, so it can move up and down in the atmosphere. And it has tentacles below.
Okay. Do you want to hear a very interesting thing about jellyfish?
Always.
So, I'm not sure if this is all jellyfish or just a particular jellyfish, but there's at least one jellyfish whose brain is wrapped around its esophagus in a donut shape.
That is very cool.
Very cool. But the interesting thing here is that one could speculate that if the jellyfish were to swallow something a little bit too big, there would be like mechanical stress on the brain as the blockage passes like under it, right. And that pressure, one could speculate, would lead to like a sort of narcotic effect on the jellyfish. So in the context, because I'm thinking a lot about spec bio these days, and this is Biblaridium was talking about this actually, and was like, you can totally imagine a scenario where you have sentient like creatures that evolve from this like proto state, this jellyfish type thing with a brain wrapped around esophagus, and they would get high not by consuming chemicals, but just by consuming some sort of implement of food that's a little bit too big for their esophagus, that would get wedged there to form their brain, make them trip balls, and then maybe just melt away after a while. Like a gobstopper sort of jazz would be the equivalent of these jellyfish people tripping balls, which is just so fun. So anyway, that was the jellyfish thing. So the spiced Atramia jelly. So are these, given that chief bailiff, like Deshag is a commander, and this guy, there's a chief bailiff. These are important people, I'm assuming. Do I also work on the assumption that a spiced Atramia jelly is a bit of a delicacy here?
Yeah, this is a fancy meal.
Okay. And
this is a very fancy meal.
A once a year fancy meal? Is it the equivalent of like turkey at Christmas, that sort of jazz?
Dajag did get a taste for it when he was stationed in Otvev. And they had it as part of their Year's Rise celebrations. Maybe not quite as rare as once a year, but yeah, certainly like having a big roast turkey.
Okay.
So not everyday fare. The average groundsfolk would probably never have it.
Sure. And then so some of the ingredients here, ice herbs. What is an ice herb? Talk to me about that.
So that's just, there's kind of a normal assumed mix of herbs that grow in the north of Avesk, of the Aveski area. So like, kind of spicy, herby kind of things that are made into a blend. And there will be kind of regional variations, or different chefs or different kitchens may have their own kind of ratios, their own recipes for it. but it's kind of a sort of a normal thing for seasoning.
So this is like the what's that thing? Those herbs that you get in a tea bag sometimes in fancy schmancy French places. Bouquet garni.
I'll take your word for it.
I need to fact check that. I think that's bouquet garni. Apologies, French people. That is definitely not how it's pronounced, but here we are.
It's like a garnish bouquet.
Yeah, it's a bouquet full of assorted herbs or whatever, and it's like a sort of standard thing. Like one doesn't order individual herbs, one just buys the bouquet garni.
Yeah.
The emphasis is definitely all over the place on those words. I'm really sorry, French people. Okay, stuff with figs, ice herbs. Okay, right, cool. And then so are we... describe the texture of this like jelly type thing. Are we talking meaty? Are we talking slimy? What are we talking?
It's kind of somewhere between a meat and a mushroom.
Somewhere between a meat and a mushroom. Oh, yeah. So like vegan substitute food.
Possibly. I don't know. I've been cooking with a decent bit of tofu recently, and I don't imagine it as being like that. It has more like it definitely has grain to it. Like it has there's like muscle fibers gives the grain to the meat. It has that. And I think some mushrooms do as well.
Are these jelly things, are they plants or animals?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I would say they're probably something more like somewhere between a plant and a fungus.
Okay, all right, grand.
Whether they're like actually capable of thought isn't clear. Kind of like with jellyfish.
I mean, I thought the consensus with jellyfish is that they're amazingly smart.
Are you sure about that?
I'm pretty sure, because I know a lot of people who they're fine with eating meat, but they're weird about eating jellyfish because they're kind of like, these things are super clever.
I googled jellyfish intelligence, and it says jellyfish are not very smart. They have very simple sensory organs and no brain to process any information.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I'm not smart.
Are you thinking of like seals?
No, I was thinking of octopuses.
Oh, okay, yes.
Sorry, I was completely wrong there. Sorry, folks. Right, yeah, of course, yeah, jellyfish aren't that smart. Ice herbs, right? Then it says bake in the number 2 oven. What is a number 2 oven? Is that just the second oven in the kitchen, or what's that about?
Yeah, he has various ovens in his kitchen, and that's the correct one to bake this at. Like there is a routine. Different ovens will be used for different things, and will be kept at different temperatures, or things like that. They will have sort of different settings and different things that they're suited for.
And then afterwards, after describing the recipe, Dejark says, "I will be taking to the table at midnight." What's that about? That's very late to be eating. What's the sort of expected time to be eating for the Abeski?
For events like that, it could be a late thing. Especially like if he's expected to be off on business. And Eitvalv is a very busy man, has a lot of business to do. So that's just like they often shift their schedules in that direction.
But ordinarily, what's the sort of eating time? Do the Abeski and do peoples on this world, do they generally follow like the solar cycle, like eat when the sun goes down, breakfast when the sun comes up, that sort of thing? Or is it
I'd imagine sort of regular working people would, but not necessarily the elite.
Okay. And would there be a general culture of what's the culture surrounding dinner? Do you know of? Like, are they a culture that values having a big giant meal in the middle of the day, or are they very much prioritize breakfasts? Because I often find that very interesting that some cultures are kind of like, the thought of having dinner at 6 is nonsense. You just have a big breakfast and a little bit of lunch, and that's you for the day. And then if you ask a different culture, it's an entirely different eating regimen throughout the day. So what's the let's say specifically for the upper classes, what's their sort of typical regiment?
Would be that's a good question. Let me think about that. I suppose, an evening meal would be the main one, because that's when you can do this kind of like business and networking sort of stuff. So culturally, that would be kind of emphasized there. For groundsfolk, I don't know, the time of day when they're not working. So depending on their shifts, etc.
Yeah, I suppose, like you said, it's very much tied to the natural rhythm of the day. No.
Mm-hmm.
And then all the way at the bottom of the end, I'm not sure if there's anything to bring up about the thievery in the middle paragraph, other than I felt like that was tying it to the general narrative thread that's been going on of late. So I'll skip that, but feel free to come back to it later. At the end, you were like, finally ensure that all bread, flour and meal ordered for the house are from the mill at First Tower. Why? What is this place? Is this some sort of renowned wholesaler? What's that about?
Because Erbavi is buying the sawdust from the mill and giving him a good price on unadulterated grain.
Who is Erbavi? I'm confused.
She owns the mill at the First Tower.
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry. He's just getting a good deal. Sorry. My bad. Yeah, that's all my points. What have you got to say about it?
Why is the woman who runs the bread mill buying sawdust?
Why is the woman who is running the bread mill buying sawdust? I can think of two things. One uses sawdust to like light fires and cook things. Mm-hmm. Or I suppose a more nefarious thing is that you put a bunch of sawdust in with flour and it's cheaper to produce bread.
Exactly that.
Exactly that.
Exactly that. Which is historically like very, very common.
Yeah, apparently, which is just mental.
Yeah.
Absolutely mental.
Gross.
It is gross, isn't it? What else have we got?
So about the kind of the paragraph about the theft and stuff. Mm-hmm. Essentially here there is a culture of kind of mild corruption.
Yeah, because you say so, like, make sure the theft doesn't exceed reasonable amounts.
Yeah. So it's kind of, they're kind of hoping that the commander will turn a blind eye to theft from his household, and the servants kind of, they regard that as a kind of an unspoken perk. And he's happy to do that so that, they will be loyal because they can get their food there. And if he clamps down on it, they will have less food and they will be less secure and their families will be less secure. So it's kind of like allowing a little bit of corruption as a sort of a pressure valve. I mean,
sure,
for
but
discontent.
Could they not just formulate that into like part of the contract? As in, you work here, every week you get X amount of whatever.
Oh, I mean, they do, but the wages aren't very good.
Yes, but what I'm saying is, why can't you? Why couldn't they just like legalize the corruption? Like, as in, make that be like, you get this wage here, but just like I'm telling you formally, you can also take X amount of carrots, as opposed to leaving that to like the kitchen black market to sort out.
I mean, like this kind of thing happens a lot historically, and there's a variety of reasons for it. Partially, it's just kind of a culture thing, and no one has gotten around to legislating it out or ruling it out. Things don't always follow the most, what might seem like the most sensible thing at the end, because there's all the factors that go into getting to that point that have to be dealt with. And if they were giving that as a perk legitimately and openly there, maybe other people would expect similar kind of perks and similar better treatment. Whereas if it's done as a sort of acknowledged corruption, it's still kind of deniable.
Yeah, that makes sense. And actually, as you explain it, a parallel occurs to me with tipping culture in the US, where I guess you could make the argument, like, why not just, instead of having those tips occur like as a random benefit, just bake it into the employee's salary. And I guess that's kind of the same thing I was saying. And, when you put it in that context, you're like, well, of course, these things don't always happen, and hence tipping culture in the States. But I guess as well...
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, why not just increase the prices and then give the thing more pay? Like, increase the prices by the 20% that you would charge for a tip or whatever, and then give all of that to the employees. But yeah, just, that would be a sensible way to do it, but it just doesn't necessarily happen. Sure,
and I guess... I suppose I've heard that people defend tipping culture in the States with saying that, like, you should be able to like reward good service. Because I think the argument goes that like if you can't elect tip or not, and that person just gets paid the extra, they are not incentivized to like serve you well or some nonsense like that. I don't understand that argument. I think it's nonsense anyways. But I think it would apply in the kitchen here as well. But it's kind of like if you work extra hard, maybe the person who oversees the storeroom or whatever might be like, well, you know what, today you can take 5 carrots, but you, John, you only take 2. You didn't clean the cooker well enough. Like I suppose there might be a bit of a like literal carrot and sticks going on there.
Yeah, for sure. It gives them an extra tool with which to kind of if someone is being out of line, well then they can say, oh well, you stole something.
Yeah, you can make it legit when you require it to be legit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for sure,
exactly.
for sure.
Speaking of carrot and stick, I say about the longer limbs should be set aside for curing. They can be used to make whips.
And is that the exclusive thing, or would you also cure them to make like jerky?
Possibly. You could possibly could actually, yeah. But here they're being set aside for curing, for like kind of punishment whips.
Wow, I never picked up on that. That is really dark.
No, I mean I didn't specify it there. There wasn't anything to suggest that was what it was for, but that's what it's for. I also have a whole kind of thing about what Dajag and Ta'Aithvav are up to.
What do you mean you have a whole type of thing?
I mean, I there was no way to put this into this memo that he wrote for his head chef. But they're meeting up to coordinate the protection that the bailiffs are putting on the various kind of food depots, so that the riots won't happen at Tamari depots. They'll happen at the other companies.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So to both kind of decrease pressure on the Tamari food supplies, because people will be getting it from the stuff being stolen from the other companies, and to increase their own kind of stock value or whatever, because they're having better security and are better able to provide services and deliveries and things. And so yeah, he's just like totally bribing Ta'Aithvav, total corruption. And I suspect that there's some kind of, I suspect that Dajag has something over the chef as well. I trust we understand each other, that he knows he's capable of elegant corruption. But he has something over him that is keeping him in line.
Yeah, I mean, one doesn't get to be commander of anything without having some sort of dirt on a lot of people.
I would assume so.
Yeah, that's just like par for the course. And yeah, he does. You do state that I trust we understand each other. We should we understand each other? I trust we understand each other. You emphasize that twice. So yeah, clearly he knows something. I love how my brief was like, can you make like a cooking related post? And like, again, I was expecting just like a pamphlet on how to make tamari tea, but we've still baked it into the unrest that's going on. I think that's great. I think it's really fun. You didn't do the expected thing of just making a cookbook entry. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I started in that, but it's not very interesting, and you can't give a lot of extra flavor to it. You can't give a lot of extra kind of interesting world building into it. Or, just like you'd have to make up the measurements and things, make up the measurements units, etc., which is kind of an interesting thing to do, but it's not a very engaging read.
I mean, yeah, I guess the way I would have done it was much like Ancient Civilisations, cooking in Ancient Civilisations. I would have just made it a recipe, like an Abeski recipe of a Thani dish, and have loads of footnotes to be all like, oh, well, in these regions, this would have been particularly prevalent, but you can substitute with this thing, which in the Abeski regions is a lot more prevalent. You could do something like that.
Yeah.
And I guess you could also bake into some pretty racist things into it to be all like, like the thick ignorant or thanis only cook this in this sort of vessel, but clearly that's way inferior. You should cook it in this vessel, and you can, bring in prejudice and that sort of thing. But I think you're right, and just like if it was a cold cookbook, just literally like a list of ingredients and a methodology, that would be pretty boring. I think you're right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Sky Jelly. Done?
I think that's done.
Hey. Okay. Let's now finish with the beginning of the show.
Let's open with some follow-up.
Let's open with some follow-up. So do you remember ages and ages and ages ago when I was in Korea, we talked about Korean age and how I think it's awesome. And for people who are unaware, my understanding is, and I am not Korean, so I'm liable to get this wrong. Korean people, if you're listening, please write in and correct me. But my understanding is that in Korea, there is at least an age system that says that when you exit the womb, you are 1. So your 0th birthday is on conception or whatever. You exit the womb at 1, and then everyone in the country at the same time on, I think it's like January the 1st, increases a year in age, regardless of when you were born. So if you were born December, 30 days has September, 31st, if you were born the 31st of December, you would be 1 on 31st of December. And then on the 1st of January, you would be 2. And that's kind of how the system works. And I think that is like really fun, and I think it's a little bit, I guess it's like it's not as efficient as maybe other systems out there, because there can be confusion as like, there's different types of 2-year-olds. Like you could have a very old 2-year-old and a very young 2-year-old, but it's not a radical departure from the ambiguity that occurs in our system. I think it's great. And I was just browsing the internet, and I saw an article from the BBC here that says that Koreans are thinking about switching over to the international age system. And I was really sad, because I'm like, I'm always sad when there's homogenizing of culture. And particularly when people, we talked long and hard about this before, but like people who are not the dominant cultures on the world stage are kind of like forced in a way to just like get in line with what everyone else is doing. So they are like, no one's going to like, no American or no English person or no European is going to adopt Korean age, but the Koreans are kind of sort of are forced to adopt international age. And that makes me really sad. But the article does state that, the Korean, this tradition of Korean age may well live on in like colloquial terms. And I think that's really dope. And apparently also this has been a thing that the government has tried to do for a while. There's been a couple of bills to try and get international age to be the norm, and they keep being defeated, which is I'm also really happy about, because I'm like, yes, we need like interesting culture and flavor. Like we don't all have to be Westerners. Like, come on, this is awesome. So I just came across that, and it reminded me of podcast episodes many moons ago, and I thought I'd bring it up. Links in the show notes to the article for everyone.
Cool. Yep.
I mean, and you I'm assuming you would agree, like, because you don't strike me as a man who is anti other cultural practices. You don't strike me as a person who's all like, no, you must be like us, and that's it.
You've got me so wrong, Edgar. There should only be one culture. That is my firm belief. No, of course. I mean, I find that one very peculiar. That specific one quite peculiar. I mean, it doesn't actually matter in any way, but just it's so different to how we think of age, and like, a 2-year-old should be able to walk, etc. I mean, that's just what I'm thinking, because, a lot of my friends are having kids and stuff. So I'm thinking in those terms, and it's peculiar to me to have something where that doesn't make any sense at all. But yeah, it doesn't actually really matter.
No.
It's just a different way of counting things. And obviously, because everyone understands how the thing is calculated, they're not going to think of that in the same way. They're not going to think, well, a 2-year-old has to be able to walk, because that expectation is arrived from a totally different point of view.
Yeah, and I mean, there's an awful lot that we do where we need to have age ranges to clarify things. Like, you know, an 18 to 24-year-old will be expected to do X, Y, and Z. We already have that, and we already have that ambiguity. There's always going to be ambiguity in any sort of age system, unless, you know, you give your age in like hours exactly, or time, seconds since the Big Bang. That's the only way you're going to have non-ambiguity. So like every system has ambiguity, just the Korean system has ambiguity in a different way, and I would hate to lose that flavor from the world.
Agreed.
So I think it's dope, at least according to BBC article, notably not a Korean article. Apologies for this, folks. But I think it's dope that there doesn't seem to be any great incentive for like regular people to drop it. I think that's cool. You know, you can have one thing official and then just everyone does whatever they want outside of official context. I think that's really awesome. So long live Korean age practices. Don't lose it. It's class. And if anyone knows of alternative age practices, aging or age listing practices, age counting practices from around the world, let me know, because the only ones I know of really are the Korean one and our one. I don't really know of a third. So if anyone does know, please let me know. That would make for some really interesting follow-up.
Absolutely.
All right. Point two. Point two came from various sources, from the YouTube comments, from Reddit. There's a couple of people, so I'm not going to list anyone in particular because loads of people brought up the thing. We talked, Bill, last time you were talking about planets. Remember we were talking about orbital motion? And you had said something to the effect of... you would postulate a scenario where there was a planet who had one face facing a star always, but it was like rotating. So it's like on its side, rotating around, but one pole was always facing the star. Yeah?
Yes, that's what I was trying to explain. Yeah.
Interrogate. And you can hear me, if you go back and listen to this, folks, you can hear my brain go, wait, no, that's not correct. And then for me to like struggle to try and explain why the hell that will be incorrect. And I failed miserably on air. And the Reddit and YouTube put it perfectly. Just that scenario can simply not happen because it just violates the conservation of angular momentum. Yeah, exactly. And if you have a planet where the same face is looking at the star always, that necessarily means that its rotational period is equal to its orbital period. Like, that's the only stable scenario there.
Yeah.
You can't have a scenario where one pole is facing the planet and the planet is facing the star and the planet is rolling around on its side. I did such a bad job of explaining that. Like, I should have just used those two words, angular momentum, but it just didn't come to me at the time. And there was a whole lot of waffling, and so I need to apologize for that, folks.
I'll forgive you in time.
In time. It'll take a little bit of time. Further clarifying point on, again, last show, I think it was Harry Cook sent in their Celtic language, and we got talking about animate mass nouns. And again, you know, word is scripted. I think I would have picked words a little bit better here. I think a lot of people took away from what I was saying that, like, I think the concept of animate mass nouns just don't exist. Like, they shouldn't exist because we care about animate things and we like to count animate things. Therefore, there is no such thing as an animate mass noun. What I was more trying to get at, and I think did badly, was just highlighting the notion of animacy divides in nominal counting. Like, it's really common for like animate things to just be way more countable than non-animate things. And I think the way Harry's email was laid out, and this could be my bad for misreading it, it seemed to like give a special place of importance to animate mass nouns. And I was like, that's kind of weird. Like, usually animate mass nouns are kind of like, they're sprinkled there, but they're very like, they don't happen very often. Most animate things are countable. But I think Harry's email, to me anyways, felt like there was a great deal of importance placed upon animate mass nouns. So that's the point I was trying to make. Hey folks, animacy split in counting is a thing. We really like to make animate nouns countable, and we don't really like making them mass nouns. Both can exist. There's just an extreme preference for count animate nouns. I hope that makes more sense than last episode.
I think so.
Hey, good. Fourth thing, geez, this is such a weird format, the reverse show, because like usually we start off with the follow-up and there's like a rapid fire bullet points follow-up, and then we like chill and listen to Bill, and then there's a waffle at the end. But this is so strange to have the chill part of the thing. It's like the harmonic progression of the show is increasing as we get to the end, which is the polar opposite of what we usually do. It's very strange. But anyhow, Samuel writes in to send us an email, again, on the subject of what we talked about last month. We talked about retrograde climates a little bit, and they sent in a bunch of papers and sites for anyone who's interested in working with retrograde climates. I will stick those in the show notes for anyone who's interested. Notable though, we didn't get any emails or any feedback from people sending in papers for high obliquity climates, which I remember talking about in the last show is the one that's has stumped me for a long time. Can't find anything decent on a high obliquity climates. Lots on retrograde climates because it's like a lot. It's an easier task to try and solve. High obliquity is a nightmare. So if anyone does have papers on high obliquity climates, please send it my way. And I have a further point, but that last point is a bit of a discussion point, so I might actually park that. You have something to bring up here from All of You Bean, Bill.
Yes. So on Reddit, and the comments from the last episode, All of You Bean asked, would it be possible for society to develop that uses two different bases in different situations? So that had counted coins in base 12 because it has more useful divisors, but counted animals in base 10 because you can keep track with your fingers, etc. I'm not sure of any examples of this exactly, but I do know that there is a kind of a tension within Celtic languages that historically used base 20. They were vigesimal. Is that how you say the word?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Historically, they would have been vigesimal, but in modern times with kind of Celtic Renaissance and stuff, they are often base 10. So that's definitely the case in Welsh, and I think in Irish as well. And I think it might be slightly more common to use the vigesimal for counting time and stuff, and then decimal for other things. So I guess one of the ways that could develop is influence from other languages, or influence from another language group. Would be one route into a situation like that All of You Bean describes. Yeah,
I mean, the base 20 mixed with base thing is really, I wouldn't say really common, but it happens a lot. Like you have it in French as well.
Oh, yeah?
The word for 80 is 420s.
Yeah.
And things like that. That's not, in fact, I think there's actually, I'll put this in the show notes, I think there's actually a Walls page on bases, the English egger, numeral bases in counting and language, and I think they're titled hybrid decimal systems. I think I'll leave the page. This is the thing that occurs quite a lot. I responded to All of You being in the Reddit, citing the off-cited yam counting thing that goes on, where they use base 6 to count the yams, but only in the context of the yam counting ceremony, and outside of that they use a different base. I'm unsure. I've never looked into it more than this, but I wonder if Are
you eating again?
I am, yeah.
How's the bread now?
The bread, it's really nice. It's just very tough. So what I've been doing is I've been soaking the bread in the sort of cheese juice, and that softens it up a little bit. Which sounds gross, but it's delightful. But anyway, what was I saying? Yeah, I wonder if in the base 6 system they use an entirely different set of numbers or they use the same numbers. I always wondered that, but I don't actually know. But these things happen where there's different bases going on for different things.
I wonder, just thinking about the ceremonial thing, could you come at it from a music point of view, that like they have the counting that's normal for everyday usage, and then they've got a different numeric system for counting rhythms.
Oh, maybe
that's an interesting one, isn't it?
How does that tie to? We don't have that in our music tradition, that we have different. What do you?
No, I know we don't.
All right. But why did you go like? Why is it like a? Oh wait, are you implying that in the ceremony is a musical one?
Well, just like it is a ceremonial thing and it involves counting, and that's like a specific usage, and music as well could be a specific usage, and it doesn't need to conform to the same limits of communication as counting sheep or counting fingers or whatever.
Yeah.
But it could still be understood as numbers.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, possibly. I don't know is the answer. If I can find the Wikipedia page, if there's a Wikipedia page on the yam counting, I'll throw it in the show notes. I don't know, but yeah, these mixed systems like happen a lot. Okay, now the final point of the show. Sorry, I'm eating the bread again. The chew zone. I've been moving the mic away. Hold on. It's so good though. This sounds like massaging my own ego for my cooking. It's not that. I was just expecting everything to be horrible and bland, but it's really tasty food. Like really tasty. James Gunter. Final point. James Gunter writes us an email and they take issue with a stance I have, which I think is actually an interesting debate point I'd like to have with you, Bill, if that's okay. I'll read out the whole email. I've had some gripe, dear Edgar. I've had some gripes about some of your views on worldbuilding for some time now, and your comments on the recent podcast were about simply modding the Earth's climate and model. Don't get me wrong, I respect your content, but I feel as though you are scared by uncertainty about different conditions other than Earth-like. Many studies have been done about non-Earth-like conditions, and I think you have neglected them. If any alien life is ever found, it is highly unlikely to be on a planet that is a modded Earth. My question is, do you think that worldbuilding that strays too far from Earth-like is unrealistic? So I think this is really interesting, right? James has me pinned fairly well here. Like I fall heavily on the side of like keep things kind of like they are and just tweak little bits and bobs here, sprinkle in a little bit of flavor, but don't like do a radical redesign of an Earth-like planet. Stick to the one we already have. And I know other people who are not like that at all. Like I know other people who are kind of like, their universe is multiple flat planes of magical existence that interact together by like some sort of psychic consciousness that people can travel through, and like they go mad. Like, and like, yeah, there's just two different sides of the spectrum there. I think I fall far on the conservative end of the spectrum. It's not for my thing. It's not that I'm scared by uncertainty. I just find it that sometimes when things get a little bit too out there, I find it really hard to just care about it, and to engage with it. I'm just kind of like, that is super weird. Great. Like it's fun that this super weird thing has been made, but I don't dig it as much, I get great joy in keeping things like very Earth-like, but tweaking something and going, oh, if I just make this one tweak, everything changes. Like I put a little bit of chlorine in the atmosphere and suddenly all the trees are made out of rubber. That's really interesting, as opposed to like I have a planet that is orbiting 4 stars and it's actually a double planet system with 5 moons and a ring system, and there's the whole solar system is passing by it passes by the black hole periodically at the center of the galaxy and all this sort of thing. It's like that's a bit much. Like it's a bit much for me. I like to keep things, stay within the realms of certainty, tweak things, and then watch the madness come from that. And the other point about it is that James says if alien life is ever found, it's highly unlikely to be on a planet that is modded Earth. That is correct, for sure. The thing about that is though, if we do find alien life somewhere, chances are, if it's not on a place that is kind of like Earth, it's going to be so radically different to Earth-like life that it's just going to be like hard to care about it from a narrative sort of sense. Like I think of some episodes of Star Trek where they postulated like intelligent gas clouds roaming interstellar space. Like it's very hard to like make a D&D campaign, for example, where you're an intelligent gas cloud. Like that's so far removed from the human experience and how humans experience the world that it becomes kind of like just very difficult to engage with and kind of uninteresting, like too trippy. So that's another thing why I think like I like taking very Earth-like conditions and just tweaking certain things, because anyone looking at it can still be like, oh, this is like an Earth-like planet, right? This isn't anything radically crazy. I can kind of engage with this pretty easily, but there's some weirdness around the edges. So that's a thing. That's why one of the reasons why I fall on this side. And then the final thing before I pass it over to you, Bill, is that I think whenever I do kind of evangelize the just take Earth and mod it a bit, I think there can be people can hear in it an implicit, I think that's the air quotes right thing to do, and if you do anything different, you're doing like world building wrong. I just want to make that like really clear. Like that is not the case. Like this is just how I like to do it, and I like to tell people how I like to do things and then take it or leave it. There's no right or wrong. It is an art form. If you want to go for like mad, weird and wacky, push the boundaries of how we think about how the intelligent life, for example, could arise and live on a planet, you go for that. That's like entirely cool, and I would celebrate someone for doing that. It's just not my bag, but there's no judgment call in there on my part at all. Yeah.
Yes.
So thoughts on that? Do you agree, disagree? Do you have anything to add?
I think you made all of the points I was going to make.
Wow. Yeah. That's really rare, Bill. Because usually I say a thing and then your immediate thing is, Edgar, no, you're entirely wrong about this because X, Y, and Z.
That's a bit harsh. No, I don't.
No, that's harsh towards me, not towards you. I'm being self-degrading that I can't come up with decent talking points and you rebut them very easily.
No, I think you're right. Like there's basically, especially for what you do, which is explore kind of the scientific basis and the maths behind things. It is a lot more difficult to do that. When it's the more speculative it gets, the more difficult it is to do your job. That was going to be my first point, but what you leaned more on, which is what I was going to say, is it's harder to engage in as a consumer, as a reader of the story, or whatever. It can be really worthwhile. It can be really engaging. It can be very effective, but it is more difficult to do that and keep the kind of the same level of rigor that's involved in what you do. Yeah. So I mean, there is definitely scope within world building to do that stuff, 100%. And I would enjoy seeing that. And I would enjoy seeing the different kinds, like you said, they're really kind of out there, shifting planes held together by psychic consciousness. That's fantastic. Or, do something really kind of hardcore, scientifically accurate, but just very, very other. All great approaches, but it's just, it's just a different flavor and a different approach. Yeah, it's just a personal taste thing. And then, but I think another thing actually I meant to say, and I should have said previously, is that another reason why I fall on the side of the more kind of, God, this bread, sorry, hold on. Oh, and now the beer is warm. Oh, God. This Mesopotamian breakfast is going south fast. South of the border, down old Mesopotamia way.
Another reason why I fall kind of more on the conservative end of things is that I've been surrounded by creative people my whole life. Like my dad was an architect and an artist. I studied music in college. I trained for a summer to be a sculptor with sculptors for a little bit. And so I was always interested and surrounded by creative people. And literally throughout my entire life, every time I engaged in any sort of creative endeavor, I was always kind of, and I sought advice from those around me. I was always given the advice of just be less weird, rein it in a little bit. You don't have to paint using every single color possible right now. Just constrain yourself a little bit, keep things more low key. And I think that's...
You're a maximalist by nature.
I am a bit. And I think that spills over to how I think about world building. It's I could have a planet that has a high obliquity planet that has rings, that's also retrograde, that also has a double planet, that's also at a Lagrange point, and put all the things I know that we can do that's kind of weird in the astrophysics domain or the astronomy domain, put it all into one setting. But like, I've been trained over the years to just immediately go, no, stop. Do one of those things and like make it like a feature of the thing you're doing. And yeah, I think that's just become second nature now. So if you talk to Edgar, like, I don't know, 15 years ago, I might have been, and in fact, I think some of my early attempts at world building were this, where they're just kind of like kitchen sink world building. It's like, I know a thing, high axial tilt, that's going to be put into this project, no matter what's already in the project. So I think that's another reason why I err on this conservative thing. Is just I've had it drilled into me by a bunch of creative people throughout my life that I respect, and they all seem to share this kind of common ethos of like, less is more. Don't go too mad. Let complexity arise out of simple decisions, that sort of thing. Would you agree with that sort of ethos, Bill?
Let complexity arise out of simple conditions.
Yeah. Don't.
Yeah, I'd say so. I think that's kind of an interesting way to do it. Like, change a small element and see what the knock-on effects of that are.
For sure. Or I think the stadium one that always sticks to me is like in composition class in college. I remember doing the like going mad with like, I want to do everything all at once. Mm-hmm. And the professor was like, okay, tell you what, just go away for a week. Will you just write like a short piece of music? You limit yourself to it being short. You're not writing an epic hour-long piece, just short. And just give me 2 notes. Pick 2 notes. That's all you can do. 2 notes, 1 page of music, go. And I remember being like, this is bullshit. And then as I started writing, I was like, oh, wait a minute. This is actually kind of like, this constraint is awesome. And then at the end of it, you end up with this like really complex thing, but it starts from very simple conditions. And that I find to be deeply pleasing, you know? And again, just to tie it explicitly back, in world building, that's the equivalent for me, taking a planet, putting a smidge of chlorine in the atmosphere, and then weird stuff happens. As opposed to, it's a planet orbiting a black hole with, I don't know, intelligent space dust around it. Like, that just doesn't do anything for me. I
think the way I often think about music, and it sort of applies here, is, and applies in a lot of situations, things can be better defined by what they aren't or what they don't do than what they do. The restrictions are often better at defining what things are.
It's all about the notes you don't play, Bill.
And I think that kind of can be applied a bit here. Like, if you're trying to do everything, it's hard for any one thing to mean anything at all.
Mm-hmm. And I think if you have like super weird out there speculative settings, I think that kind of almost lends itself to attempting to do everything, to like maximize the speculativeness of the setting. So therefore you do all the things. And as you say, it means that any one thing doesn't mean as much.
Yeah.
But I want to just reiterate, that is not a judgment call. Like, that is literally just my personal taste.
Sure.
I really don't want people to go away with this thinking like there is a right or wrong way to create art. Like, there absolutely isn't. So that's just really important. I'm just trying to give you how I'm thinking and how we think about this. Art, there's no right and wrong in art. One cannot stress that enough. And anyone who does tell you that there's a right and wrong in art is a silly person. Don't listen to them. Closing points.
Go for it.
No, as in, do you have any closing points, or is that the show?
I don't think I have any closing points. I think all of my points have been made.
Brilliant. I enjoyed this topsy-turvy, weird show today, Bill. I liked it.
Is this an example of making one change, doing the show in reverse, and seeing what happens?
I mean, I would say the one change is deciding to cook, and then that like leading to, oh well, crap, the cooking section has to go first because the food needs to be warm. Ergo, the whole show has to be reversed. Ergo, this might be the genesis of an entirely new form factor for the Artifexian podcast. Who knows? Like, things could get mad trippy from here on in. We just don't know. But we started off with a very simple thing. We'd like to make breakfast.
Could do like a sonata form episode where like we talk about two things in the first segment and then we talk about them like separately and then we talk about how they connect together in the second segment. And then the third segment we talk about them both again, but the second one is now the same thing as the first one.
Oh my God, this is going to lead to like a whole tangent that may or may not be cut.
Yeah, we need to stop this before we get into a tangent.
No, Jesus, no. We're going to get into the tangent. Hold on, I'm really intrigued in this. Our usual show, Bill. What would you describe its form factor as? Because there's clearly 3 sections.
Yeah,
but they don't like. So it's not a through composed format. But these sections have no real interaction with one another. So like I was just like a straight ABC, but what is ABC? Like there's no label for that form, is there?
It's a short rhapsody.
What's a rhapsody?
Like A, B, C, D, E. where they're not necessarily related to each other.
Is that the definition of rhapsody? Just like
that's what rhapsodic form is, yeah.
Oh, I never experimented with rhapsodic form. That sounds like a mad cop-out altogether. That sounds like a form where someone just didn't want to do form.
Yeah, I mean, you could make that argument, yeah.
So, oh my God. So what we do is, like, we do a rhapsody on world building.
Yeah, I suppose.
The title of the show.
Oh no!
I actually that is a strong case for title, and it actually kind of makes me happy.
Well, it's got nothing to do with food. I think the title should be food related.
Oh, yeah, but Rhapsody on cooking doesn't make any. I'd like to have like a Rhapsody thing in there. I'll think about it. And now, if I do make a Rhapsody related title, this part of the show would have to remain in the show in order for that title to make any degree of sense.
True. I mean, you can leave it in either way, but if you do call it that, you have to leave it in.
That is fair. Yeah. But I suppose if the title of the show isn't Rhapsody, this whole bit would just be a bit of a slog for people.
Potentially.
I have decisions to make on the cutting room floor. Anyway, I really enjoyed myself, but that was really fun. If you really like this food crack, let us know, and we can expand upon it a little bit, perhaps, because I am mad interested in learning about how different people's cook. I think that's really fun to learn about. Yeah, outside of that is the show. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting the show on Patreon. Links to all of these things are in the show notes. Until next time,
Edgar out.